This summer, members of the Green Party of England and Wales will be voting to elect a new leadership team. Now, the party's leadership election has been attracting a lot of attention from party members and from the wider media, with the party's current deputy leader, Zach Palazzi, in the running against Adrian Ramsey, a current co leader of the Green Party, and Ellie Chowns, one of the Green Party's four MPs, who are standing on a job share ticket, seeking to be the party's new co leaders. However, there's also a contest for the party's deputy leadership going on at the same time. Now, this hasn't attracted the same attention, but there are 9 candidates in the running, and it's a hugely important contest for the future of the Green Party. So at Bright Green, we're trying to draw more attention to that contest, and part of the way we're doing it is through this interview series. Today, I had the pleasure of interviewing Ash Routh, who's standing for the deputy leadership, one of the 9 candidates. I hope you enjoyed the interview. Before we delve into it, I have one thing to ask of you, which is you scroll down right now and hit subscribe. So it's my absolute pleasure today to be joined by Ash Routh, one of the candidates for the Green Party deputy leadership. Ash, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It's a good day.
Fantastic. So I'm going to give you a nice, hopefully easy question to kick
Sure.
things off today, which is why do you think you're the person who is best placed to be the Green Party's next deputy leader?
I think that we are sort of what has been missing from how we put ourselves forward. Um, since the last general election, Reform have made a big, big breakthrough. And I think that we need to pay attention to that because it is people who are sick of Labour and the Conservatives largely that are moving to Reform. And those same concerns can drive people to the Green Party, but we're just not quite tapping into it. I think a big part of our problem is that we are perceived as very middle class and very southern focused. The last general election didn't help in that respect. We didn't have any target seats north of Leicester. I think it would be really, really helpful for us to have somebody in a prominent leadership role who is in the north and is working class and is a experienced performer. I spend a lot of my time on stage. I know how to work audiences. I know how to get people going. I'm not dry on stage, and I think we could do a bit more of that.
So you mentioned there that you think the Green Party needs a person in the leadership team who is from the north and working class.
Mhm.
You're not the only candidate that meets that criteria in this year's deputy leadership election. So why do you think you specifically are better placed to take on that role?
Am I not?
Martin Ali is from Bradford, from the north of England, and so you're definitely not the only northern candidate in the election.
Isn't Watford
I
an
wouldn't want
accountant?
to. He is currently accountant, I believe, yes, but I think he would very much describe himself. I think he has described himself as being from a working class background. You may wish to dispute that, and I'll leave you open to do that if you wish to.
I think the Green Party has a lot of people who were working class once and are representing working class communities. I don't think that's the same thing as being present tense working class. Being working class in 2020, in 1990, is a very different experience as to being working class in 2025.
Okay, and you sort of touched on it in your early responses, but one of the things that you've talked about in your campaign is that the Green Party needs to revolutionise its image. What does that mean in practice?
We, Tories on bikes, I think, is probably a concern that anyone who's gone and campaigned for the Green Party has heard at one point or another on the door. We are seen by a lot of people as NIMBYs, as opposing infrastructure projects, as being a party that almost wants to sit on the sidelines and say, I told you so, rather than to actually be in government. I think that's grown from us having one MP for so long. There is a real perspective that the Green Party is, in essence, a protest party rather than a serious party trying to get into government. I think we need to change that.
And earlier on as well, you talked about how reform has sort of grown over the last, well, 12 months in particular. And
Mhm.
you talked about how you think the Greens could be tapping into some of the frustrations with mainstream politics that's driving people towards reform. Now, people watching will be very aware that the Green Party and Reform have very, very different policy platforms. So, how do you think that you could, or the Greens could, be tapping into the frustration that people that's leading people towards reform, without having to, ape any of their policy platform or
Absolutely.
rhetoric.
Yeah, I'm certainly not suggesting we adopt reforms policies. Certainly, we're seeing how well that's going for Labour, which is not well. I think as Greens, it's our duty to change people's minds in politics, not to chase the prevailing public opinion at any rate. So I don't think the Green Party should ever change a policy that we sincerely believe is right in pursuit of public opinion. I don't think that's how we operate. I don't think that's the Green way. But more importantly, I think the thing that's making reform breakthrough is populism. It's people who are tired of more of the same and are looking for a radical alternative. We have already seen in the last general election there are green reform swing voters. Those people do exist. And those are people looking for a radical alternative and are maybe less bothered about what specific radical alternative it is. I don't think we need to ape reforms policies. I would never advocate for that. But I think we need to look at how they strategize and how they've broken through messaging wise, because they've done a much better job than us at that.
And so, in terms of sort of the Green Party moving forward, its electoral prospects and so on, how many seats do you think that the Greens could realistically be targeting at the next general election?
This is the interesting question because obviously our way of targeting seats is gradual and incremental. We get that first breakthrough seat on a council and then we grow from there. We've sort of done the same thing in the House of Commons. Reform in the local elections this year were winning in council seats that they've sort of spent no time in. You know, they might not have even delivered a leaflet, and yet they're still winning councillors. It's why they've had so many resignations, because it was people who never expected to be councillors in the first place. I think it's really hard to say because the way we win seats is that we target one place and we look at, are we in second place or are we in winnable third place? Can we bring this up? You know, what's the demographics? How does it work there? I think the reality is when we get our messaging right, it's sort of, you know, a rising tide lifts all ships. I think it's really hard to know which seats are going to become winnable because I think if we get our messaging right and we start to see a reform style lift, seats all over the country are going to become in play in the same way that reform has swept council seats all over the country. At the current rate, reform's going to end up with more councillors than we do next year. It's only by a fairly narrow margin that we stayed ahead of them. And we only bumped up a tiny bit while they shot up loads. So I think next year, unless we change tactics, I think we need to change tactics straight away because we need every local election we can to watch that tide rise. I think it's the only way we're going to know which seats are viable. It's really hard to say right now. There are northern seats that I think are winnable right now. Huddersfield, Sheffield Central, which is where I live. But realistically, if we change tactics now and we get a reform style lift, we've got some local elections to gain that data to work out where we're breaking through, to work out what is now in play, because it's really hard to judge it until we do that.
So I'll notice that you didn't put a number on that. I'm going to ask you if I'm going to say a series of numbers, and I'm going to ask you to stop when you think that I'm being unrealistic.
Okay.
So do you think the Greens could be targeting 10 seats the next general election?
Higher,
20,
higher.
30,
I think we could get 200 if we got the messaging right.
200 seats? Okay, so that is a obviously a big leap from 4 to 200.
If we
And
got,
I guess you've talked there about the sort of reform approach to elections.
mm-hmm.
Now, those who have sort of advocated the Green Party sort of incrementalist approach to elections over the last few years would say that the Green Party model has proven to be sustainable,
Mm-hmm.
i.e., over time, you get a small number of councillors elected, you demonstrate that they're effective elected representatives, that they do things that people like, you get a small number more elected, and so on and so on and so on until you get to the point where you end up with, as the Greens are now, on 900 councillors and 4 parliamentary seats.
Mm-hmm.
And they would point to not just reform, but its previous iterations as UKIP and the Brexit Party to suggest that actually the reform model isn't a way of delivering sustainable growth. So you mentioned that you've had I think it's close to a dozen reform councillors who've resigned since the May local elections.
Yeah, yeah.
Lots of them because they didn't think they were going to get elected, or because they realised they weren't well suited to the role. They're now on a fewer number of parliamentary seats than they started with because of people having to resign the whip or being forced out of the party. You had UKIP, which had a huge surge in general elections and European elections, and yet fell apart a few years later. So, why do you think that the sort of reform approach of sort of big national messaging that can deliver sharp shocks to the electoral process is the right way for the Greens to go?
Well, first of all, I don't think UKIP and Brexit strategy has been the same as reform. I appreciate there's a common factor there, which is Nigel Farage. I think he has become more politically savvy over time. I also think the political environment in 2025 is very, very different than it was, say, 10 years ago. I think that's a massive factor in reform success. That being said, sustainable growth is obviously a good thing, but ultimately our long-term goal is a sustainable society and a government that is championing that. Sustainable growth, if we gain 3 seats every general election, it's going to be a very long time until we form a majority government. Even if you generously assume that sustainable growth is going to quadruple our seats every general election, which I don't think the incrementalists would say it would, it's still going to be quite a long time until we're in government. We need to break through now because we need to get in government, and we need to get in government if we're actually going to make the difference that we need to make. It is too late for us to be able to afford to target a couple of seats, win a couple of seats. I want us to form a government in my lifetime, and I think this is the only way we can do that.
Okay, and so in order to deliver that sort of extremely ambitious electoral success, the Greens would need to be building a coalition of the electorate, i.e., pulling together different groups of voters, different demographics, different interests,
Mhm.
in order to get over the line in what you've said is possibly 200 seats. What
Yeah.
does that electoral coalition look like?
It means changing minds. You cannot increasingly, especially in 2025, you are not going to form 51% of the public opinion by trying to chase voters around. You need to change minds. It is the only way. We have to convince people on the doorstep. We have to change minds. We can't go trying to be reform and aping reforms policies or anything like that. We have to be on the doorstep changing minds. And a huge part of that is messaging, how we put ourselves across, and how we are perceived by the public. As long as we're being perceived as middle class protest party NIMBYs, never going to happen.
The counter argument to that would be that, the reform messaging isn't seeking really to change minds. It's seeking to mobilize a section of the electorate. They've got a very clear idea who their demographic is. It's people over the age of 65. It's young men, and it is socially conservative, essentially white people, and that can get them 25 to 30% in the polls. Is there a equivalent section of the electorate, slice of the electorate that you think the Greens could be appealing to that could get them to that sort of level of support?
We should be chasing young people as a voting body massively. We already know that we poll extremely well with young people. They are literally the future. This is the people that we can really, really cut through with. Millennials like me, Gen Z, is a massive, massive voting demographic who often feel very politically homeless.
And so the other bit of context we're having this conversation is that we've not only got the rise of reform on the right, but waiting in the wings, it appears that there is going to be at some point over the next couple of years, or the next couple of weeks, who knows, the launch of a new political party on the left. For
Mhm.
those who haven't been following this story, it's not clear yet what form this entity will take, but there are indications that the likes of Zara Sultana, the Labour MP for Coventry South, and the former Labour leader Jeremy Corbyn are looking to launch a new left-wing party in the UK. Ash, how do you think that the Greens should be responding to the launch of such a party?
Well, first of all, I'd be willing to take a bet. I don't think Jeremy Corbyn is going to be in a different political party ever in his life. I think that the statement that he put out was extremely non-committal, and to me, that's extremely suspicious. I don't think Jeremy Corbyn has any interest in joining a political party. I think he likes being an independent MP. So I'm dubious that Jeremy Corbyn will ever be in a political party, but let's say he does for the sake of argument, and this Sultana Corbyn thing happens. Again, hard to know because I don't know what their policies are and I don't know what the timeline they exist in. They really would need to exist tomorrow if they really want to make serious moves in the general election. I think far more likely is that it is a sort of expansion of the independent group that already exists in Parliament, and that rather than this being a party that tries to compete nationally, I think it might challenge 10, 15, 20 seats in specific areas where they think they can do well. I don't think they're going to have the infrastructure. That being said, I also don't believe in telling people but we've already got an established party. You should join the Greens, because that's what Labour have been saying to Green voters for decades. I welcome any new challenger on the political scene. I think it's a good thing for new parties to form. I'm extremely dubious that this one will form, and if it does form, I doubt it's going to challenge nationally. That being said, if and when it comes into existence, I think we should make it a case-by-case judgment. We need to know what their policies are, we need to know what they stand for, we need to know what they plan, and then we can make an informed decision. Otherwise, we're just talking ifs and buts, and we could do that all day.
I am going to ask you to talk ifs and buts, however. So
Okay.
let's imagine for a moment that this new party does form,
Mhm,
and let's say it stands, 250, 300 candidates in the next general election, and it
mhm,
stands on a platform that is very, very similar to the 2019 general election that the Labour Party stood on. Um, then you're in a scenario where um, according to opinion polls, speculative opinion polling, that party could very well eat into a significant chunk of the Greens' votes. Particularly, you mentioned young people earlier being a key demographic. The polling suggests that that party would perform particularly well amongst young people. It suggested it would perform particularly well in London. You could imagine a scenario where a whole host of seats that could potentially be Green targets in the next general election in London would actually end up being targets for this party as well. Do you
mhm.
think that in that scenario, there is a significant threat to the Greens' electoral prospects? And if so, how would you want to see the Greens address that?
So first of all, it's really clear the polling that we've had has asked people if they would consider voting for these parties. And I sort of think that's almost no information at all, because we're talking about a hypothetical party that would be politically very similar to the Green Party. And so it would be absurd for a Green voter not to consider voting for another party that has a very similar political platform. In the same way that in various general elections, I have at least considered voting for other parties that I thought had somewhat similar political platforms. So I'm not that worried about that polling. If this party exists and they want to approach us as some kind of alliance, then it would really depend what the offer is. We stood in every single seat in the last general election, and part of the point of that was that it meant that were we to be approached with anything, rather than individual local parties making negotiations, it would empower the leadership team of the party to have much more bargaining power. It's really, really difficult for a local party to negotiate a pact unless it's on a council level, because the problem is the local party only governs one area. So it's not like they could say, well, we stand down here, you'd stand down there, or we'd just do a paper candidate here, you do one there. I think that if there's ever any conversation about electoral pact, which I'd be very dubious about personally, it needs to happen on a national level, because that way there could be actual negotiating power. But I think most likely, if that were ever the case, it would be paper candidates rather than standing down. I don't like standing down for the parties. I trust the voters to be to make a informed decision about the parties they want. It really annoys me when we get told, here's a Conservative MP who won by a margin less than the number of Green voters, because I think it's insulting to those voters. They knew what they were voting for. And also in 2025, I think it's presumptuous to assume we know where voters would go if we weren't on the ballot. We know there are Green Reform swing voters. Who knows what would happen? I don't like standing down, but I'm open to having the conversation. But I think it should be had on a national level if we do it.
So I'm going to move on from the sort of big picture electoral questions now, and I've got some quick fire policy questions on issues that are possibly topics of discussion and debate within the Green Party at the moment.
Mhm.
And I'm going to press you, if possible, to give just a yes or no answer to my questions,
Okay.
and hopefully you'll oblige. So my first question is: should the UK remain a member of NATO?
No.
Is overpopulation a significant issue that needs tackling when addressing the climate emergency?
No.
Should HS2 be completed in full?
No.
Does nuclear power have a role in a sustainable energy system?
Yes.
Should the UK seek to rejoin the European Union?
Yes.
Should people who publicly oppose the Green Party's policies on trans rights be allowed to remain in the party?
Yes.
And finally, is ecological sustainability possible under capitalism?
No.
Excellent. That's my 7 quickfire questions. I'm
That
going
took
to
a
give you an
lot of
opportunity
discipline. That took a lot
because
of
it's very
discipline.
cruel. It's a very cruel set of questions. So I'm going to give you the opportunity. If there's any of those that you wanted to expand a little more on, you're welcome to.
Yeah. Okay. First of all, NATO. It's a philosophical and religious position for me. It's not something that I'm going to look to change the party's mind on. I respect that the membership has made a decision. I understand why they've made the decision. For me, philosophically and religiously, I can't back that position, but it's not something I'm interested in relitigating within the party. On trans rights, obviously, I am trans. I genuinely believe that there is space in the party for people who disagree on policy. We are literally a political party. That's how it works. But it comes with a really, really important caveat. The example I've been using is in the run up to the EU referendum, the Green Party was obviously positioned as a very proudly pro Remain party. There were Greens who voted Leave, and not an insignificant amount of them, but not enough to be a majority within the party. They didn't spend all of their time trying to relitigate the issue, trying to 180 the party's position that was very clearly established. They simply accepted that they were in a party and this was an issue that they disagreed with the party on. And I think that is a part of being in a political party. It requires emotional maturity. It requires the ability to put something down and walk away from it. I think that's a really good example to follow. As I've just said, I disagree with the party on a policy. I'm not going to try and relitigate the issue. I'm perfectly happy for us to revisit issues, but what I don't think is appropriate is when the party has spoken its mind on an issue to constantly relitigate that issue, bring it back every single conference, whether that's every 6 months or every year. I don't think it's appropriate to be constantly badgering people about it, to constantly bring it up, to make everything you do in the party about it. I think that if you disagree with the party on an issue, you need to have a conversation with yourself about whether you want to focus in and work with the party on the many, many, many issues on which you still agree with the party, or is this single issue the dominant political thing for you, the thing that you want to spend all of your time on? I'm really, really happy for us to have gender critical people in the party. I've campaigned for gender critical people, but the Green Party is not a gender critical party. I don't think it ever will be, and I don't think it ever has been. If you are gender critical, I'm very happy to have you in the party. If you only ever want to talk about gender critical issues and that's the full focus of your political work, there are better political platforms for you elsewhere. The Green Party isn't one of them.
Thanks, Ash. That was considerably longer than one word, but I'm glad that I
Sorry.
gave you the space to set that out. So, for people who've seen any of these interviews before, you will know that I like to end them with a series of slightly less serious questions. The first of which I'm going to put to you now is that the Green Party's had 5 deputy leaders in its history. Who do you think the best deputy leader the Greens have ever had has been,
Amelia.
and why?
I think Amelia was an extremely dedicated, long-standing deputy. She gave us a lot of consistency. She did a lot of work. She really did what she could to reach out to groups in the party that were less represented. I think Zach would be a serious challenger for Amelia, but I don't think, in my opinion, Zach has been in post long enough to sort of have cumulatively caught up to Amelia. I've got a lot of time for Amelia. I am a big fan. I endorsed her when she stood for leadership. I am sad that she's not a part of the leadership team. She is one of my favorite Greens ever.
And I'm assuming you're going to be giving your first preference in the deputy leadership election to yourself. If that is the case, who will be getting your second preference?
I don't know if we're allowed to say that in the election rules.
That would be a real shame if you aren't. Maybe you could use this opportunity to test the stringency of the ERO.
Well, herein lays the problem. It's laid out quite clearly that we can't endorse other candidates, and I think that this could be read as an endorsement. And if we do endorse other candidates, the ERO has been very clear that it's going to be quite strict and will consider us a slate, which will then merge our funding, which means that if I name a candidate who has spent more than £500 on their campaign, then by naming them, I might be halving their budget and making them go over budget and thus be subject to some sort of sanctions. Likewise, myself. So I really, because of the election rules, don't think I can. That being said, I think people can look at what I stand for and then look at the things I'm identifying that are needed in a deputy leader and probably work out who I think might match those things best.
Well, we'll see whether the other deputy leadership candidates take that view on the election rules as well. But my third question for you is, and you may or may not be able to answer this one as well. Who do you want to win the leadership election?
Zach.
Very clear. Why is that?
Um, I think Zach has a lot of the qualities that I'm talking about as needing in a leader, and it worries me the idea that if we go into a general election with two leaders that are holding seats that we won from the Conservatives, it could be politically very difficult for them. We are a very left-wing party, and I know they've had amazing breakthroughs, and we don't whip. And I think there's a real, representing your constituents, representing the party issue there. If they're both leaders of the party, it becomes so much harder for them. I genuinely think being leaders of the party is going to make it harder for Ellie and Adrian to defend their seats in Parliament in the next general election.
Very, very interesting. I have a few final questions for you. The first of which is, what is your favourite Green Party policy?
Ooh. my like uh that's there's quite a lot. I like that we have gender balancing in our leadership. I think it's a good thing, and I think that since that's been the case, I think you can see the effect it's had on the Green Party and how the Green Party is led. I think it's a good thing. I think the way we lead our party is a good thing in general. I like quite a lot of the aspects about our leadership. I think it's nice that the members get to make the decisions rather than the leaders. Whether this is one policy or multiple policies sort of depends on how you're dividing it. But generally speaking, I like the policy about how the Green Party is led.
And so you know what's coming next. What is your least favourite Green Party policy?
HS2. I appreciate it's maybe not the biggest issue ever, but I sincerely think it was a blunder to endorse HS2 after it got cancelled. I think that as Greens, if we are seen to endorse an infrastructure project, that is as green as that infrastructure project will ever get, because nobody building a green infrastructure project is going to get our endorsement and then go, how can we make it greener? It's an image thing. Our endorsement should be a gold standard. I think we should treat it as a gold standard, and I think even the most pro HS2 people would agree that it was over budget, it was badly managed, and that it caused needless damage. It is not a gold star, it is not a gold standard green infrastructure project, and so I don't think we should have endorsed it, because I think our endorsement sort of makes it one, and therefore creates a ceiling rather than a floor on how good future infrastructure projects can be. I think that was a serious misstep.
And finally, for you, who in the Green Party inspires you the most?
Inspires me the most. I like Caroline Jackson in Lancaster.
Talk to us about Caroline.
Caroline Caroline taught me a good amount about what I know about door-to-door campaigning, and I felt like I learned a lot walking around with Caroline and just talking Green Party stuff, talking Green Party policy, talking policy positions. Caroline doesn't agree with me on everything, and I don't think has ever agreed with me on everything. But for me, I have such nice memories of working with her in Lancaster that she sort of, I have a big Caroline nostalgia. I'm sad that I don't live in Lancaster and I don't get to spend much time with her anymore. I'm a big fan.
Fantastic. So that is the end of my questions for you, Ash. Thank you so much for giving it your time today.
Thanks.
Thank you so much for watching that interview. We hope you found it engaging, insightful, and interesting. If you enjoyed it, somebody else probably will too. So make sure you share this video wherever you can.